welcome to the 2016 Integritas Bioethics Symposium. Since 1997, the Integritas Institute for Ethics, which is a ministry of the St. John Paul II Catholic Newman Center at UIC, has brought a Catholic vision of justice and professional ethics into dialogue centered within the University of Illinois at Chicago community and with interested professionals, providing symposia, adult education events, internet media, and other resources in bioethics, business ethics, and daily ethical decision-making. Integritas Institute events have been scheduled in cooperation with the Catholic Student and other organizations on the UIC campus. Tonight's event is co-sponsored by the Catholic Medical Students Association and the Newman Catholic Students Organization. Let's give them there's some of them back there, so give them a round of applause. And by Relevant Radio. Tonight's event is called a symposium because tonight we're returning to the original meaning of the word, a philosophical banquet. Tonight's banquet is on the theme Pope Francis Field Hospital, Inspiration for Healthcare. Tonight we're also reclaiming a hidden theme lying in plain view in the Illinois Medical District, a beautiful saying in the Louis Pasteur Monument, which stands on the lawn of the north of the old Cook County Hospital. And here it is. It says, "One doesn't ask of one who suffers, what is your country and what is your religion? One merely says, you suffer, this is enough for me, you belong to me, and I shall help you." So we'll talk a little bit more about that monument later this evening. In order for us to get right to the banquet, both philosophical and food, I'd like to introduce our new and distinguished UIC Vice Chancellor for Health Affairs, Dr. Robert Barish, who will offer a greeting. If we were to call Central Casting and ask them to send us an Eagle Scout and a U.S. military veteran who has served in places like Cambodia, Somalia, Louisiana after Katrina, and almost in outer space, they would send us Dr. Robert Barish. And you know what? They did send us Dr. Robert Barish. So we're very honored that Dr. Barish has agreed to welcome us this evening. Dr. Barish.
Albert, thank you. And I'm really honored that you invited me here this evening. And our distinguished speaker, Dr. Rondelli, who is going to talk to us, is really quite a person. He, I think, as you'll hear, he's practiced in India, in Nepal, in Nigeria. It's incredible what he's done in regards to transplant, and he's also an incredible person, incredible leader here at the University of Illinois Chicago, and I'm really honored to be able to work with you as you bring us to new heights, and I think your theme tonight is going to be fascinating. It's great to be here as your new Vice Chancellor. Just a couple minutes, Albert. You know, I came, first I was 24 years at the University of Maryland, and then almost 7 years as the Chancellor of the LSU Health Sciences Center in Shreveport, Louisiana, which under my purview, we had the largest university teaching hospital in the state and two other hospitals in the Delta of the Mississippi and one very famous hospital called UEP Long, which it was a very famous governor. And because I spent almost 7 years in Louisiana, I have to tell you a story, all right? I have to tell a story. So I was introduced, and people have said, "Are you prepared for Chicago? Are you prepared for the politics in Chicago?" I said, well, you know, coming from Louisiana, I think I've gotten pretty good training. And I'll just tell you, one of the most famous senators was introducing me about a year and a half ago, and he said, "You know, our chancellor has been here 42 years, serving as the chancellor of LSU." And I said to the senator after the introduction, I said, "You know, Senator, I haven't been here 42 years. He said, "Son, every year you survive in Louisiana is a dog year." So So hopefully I'm prepared for Chicago. And as I said, thank you for the invitation. I really look forward to representing this institution, fighting for us. Its mission is incredibly noble, and I'm very honored to be your Vice Chancellor for Health Affairs. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Barash. In honor of this occasion, we'd like to provide a gift to the university that can be situated in a university location of your choosing, this replica of the plaque from the Louis Pasteur Monument. And I did read the plaque before, so this is going to be gifted to the university. We'll walk this over to your office tomorrow sometime, and you'll find a spot for it. Thank you, Dr. Barash. It is now my privilege to introduce His Excellency Joseph N. Perry, Auxiliary Bishop of Chicago. Bishop Perry convenes the advisory boards of the Integritas Institute, and we are very grateful to him for his spiritual and moral guidance. Bishop Perry will present an invocation before dinner, so immediately after Bishop Perry's invocation, just head to the food.
Thank you, Albert. Good evening, everyone. We're absolutely delighted to see all of you here. You know, symposia really don't make much sense unless you have participants. And with all the work and the brainstorming that goes on in order to create these symposia, business ethics symposia that took place several weeks ago in bioethics, what we've been doing over the years, somehow there's a good feeling that we have once we see all of you come to these symposia, because they're done really for you. It's our gift to you, and a gift of the JP2 Newman chaplaincy here at the university. Let us pause and ask God's blessing on the evening. O God, source of our being, the goal of our desire, and guide of our pilgrim days, as we turn from the clash and clamor of the world without and the pressing duties of our lives, we hush our busy thoughts to learn the mysteries of our being. You have made us for yourself, and our hearts are restless until they rest in thee. Grant us light that penetrates all that is dark or veils from us the pathway of truth and righteousness. Help us to see the broader picture of life. Help us see the truth to the mystery of our lives as you have crafted them in the design of creation. When we cannot see the distant scene, help us to take one step at a time and trust that you will lead us to the goal of our destiny. Come with us to our waiting tasks, sharpen our intellects, give us precise speech and sound judgment as we search for your presence in life, that we may have a part in shaping that better world, which is a foretaste of your kingdom. To thee shall be our thanksgiving and praise always. In the name of your Son, amen. Bon appetit.
Hello, everyone. We're going to break the program a little bit. We had planned to do this part of the program at the end, but we're going to do it right now. And that is, we want to recognize the contribution of one of the emeritus faculty of the College of Medicine, and also a longtime donor to the St. John Paul II Catholic Newman Center and to the Integritas Institute for many years, Dr. Patrick Guinan, who was on the urology faculty here at the university, and who also worked at the Hectone Institute for many years, and also the VA. He covered all the bases here, also county, I think, on the west side and in the medical center district. So what we have done is we've taken this same plaque with the Louis Pasteur quote, and we've dedicated it to Dr. Guinan. And Father is going to, Dr. Guinan really wanted to come this evening. He was going to come, but let me read the dedication. It says, Patrick Guinan, MD, in gratitude, Integritas Institute for Ethics, St. John Paul II Catholic Newman Center at UIC. So we are video recording this, and Dr. Guinan will see this presentation. So on his behalf, I'm going to give it to Father Patrick Marshall, the chaplain of the Newman Center, And let's have a round of applause for Dr. Gowden. Yeah.
Thank you, Albert, and thank you for all of you who have come tonight, and especially for our panelists. Dr. Guinan was instrumental in working with us in 1997 when we founded the Integritas Institute for Ethics. And he's been, as Dr. Schorsch said, a very big supporter, a benefactor, but also just a moral support type person to us in the last 19 years that we've had the Institute. Dr. Guinan's health is failing a bit, and so he's not able to be with us, but I'm very happy that we'll be able to present that, and as a matter of fact, later tonight I'm going to see him, so I'm honored to be able to bring that to him. Thank you again for coming tonight, everyone.
I now have the pleasure of introducing Dr. Damiano Rondelli, who is the Michael Reese Professor of Hematology, Chief Division of Hematology Oncology, Director of the Blood and Marrow Transplant at the University of Illinois Hospital and Health Sciences System. I've had the pleasure of getting to know Dr. Rondelli in the past year, and it truly is a privilege to know you, Damiano, and to spend some time with you. And I will let you talk about your life and your practice. I won't go deeply into it because we'll let you tell your own story. But Dr. Rondelli did suggest the theme for the evening. So the theme of Pope Francis Field Hospital, Inspiration for Healthcare. I think I added the Inspiration for Healthcare, but Dr. Rondelli did suggest Pope Francis Field Hospital as a good start-off theme for this year's symposium. So please welcome Dr. Damiano Rondelli, who will speak.
Thank you, Albert. Thank you, all of you, for being here. I have to say that I suggested the theme. I did not suggest to have me talking about it. But you know, also, this is very unusual for me. Of course, I normally have talks with slides and you know, talking about bone marrow transplant, leukemia, immunology, transplant. This is a very not standard for me, and I'm here not as professor, doctor. I'm here as Damiano Rondelli, as a person who wants to share with you how the Pope message actually is meaningful to my life, which is a professional life and also human life. So Pope Francis, in a very early interview that he gave, as you probably know, indicated that the church needs to be a battlefield hospital. So I will have a few quotations over the next 20 minutes about this interview of the Pope, but because I think it's important to understand how he expressed this concept. And Pope Francis says, "I see clearly that the thing that the church needs most today is the ability to heal wounds and to warm the hearts of the faithful. It needs nearness, proximity. I see the church as a field hospital after battle. It is useless to ask a seriously injured person if he has high cholesterol and about the level of his blood sugars. You have to heal the wounds. Then we can talk about everything else. And you have to start from the ground up." So this is where we start tonight. And this is the point that I try to reflect on to understand how this actually has a practical or a real meaning to me, not just like an intellectual, theoretical concept, but something really personal, something that really I can relate to with my own life. So to begin this, to talk about this, I thought that I can't explain to you what it means for me, the concept of a field hospital as a church, but also as my Catholic engagement with my life if I don't define who I am. So in our life, we have very common questions like, what do I want? What do I need? What will I be? What do I need to be? What I want to be? And these are questions that are embedded in our life, in our days of life, of decisions, of growth, of struggle. And these are the real questions that I had to confront with this field hospital. So how does the two things actually relate? So the question is, what's my identity to then talk about what I want to do or what I want to be? And I want to go back to Pope Francis because it's going to help me a lot tonight. Pope Francis was asked, so who is Pope Francis? In this interview, so well, who's Pope Bergoglio? And he answered the question by, that's my only other slide, by looking at this painting. I don't know if you can, I don't know if you know this painting, but if you can see it very well, this is a Caravaggio. And it's a painting in Rome, in the church of San Luigi dei Francesi, St. Louis of the French, which is a beautiful painting. If you happen to go to Rome and you have not seen it, please go. It's very close to Piazza Navona in downtown Rome. And in this painting, that's how Pope Francis defined himself. He said, I am one who is looked upon by the Lord. And he describes the painting where there is a call of Matthew. And Matthew, as you can see here, is having a good time with his friends. And this light comes from above, and he surprises him. And Francis says, it is the gesture of Matthew that strikes me. He holds onto his money as if to say, no, not me, not this money, the money is mine. Here, this is me, a sinner on whom the Lord has turned his gaze. So that's the, when we talk about the field hospital, like a place where we want to heal the wounds, we need to start from someone who actually has been healed himself. And the identity of my identity, at least, as a Catholic physician, a Catholic person, is first to be healed. So we happen to be in the field hospital first as patients. And as patient being healed, then we can heal other people. And the motto of the Pope Francis has picked, has his motto, miserando ad colligendo, which is, in English, is kind of, by having mercy and by choosing him. So while he was having mercy, he was also choosing him. And that's the identity of any, I think, Christian person who actually wants to be engaged in the reality of every day, seriously considering his own identity. So in our medical ward, we are now all, the buzzword in medicine is personalized medicine. You know, it's in the slogan of everything, and I think the hospital is also, I feel like this identity of Caravaggio, it's a personalized medicine that field hospital can provide, because it welcomes the single person, whoever you are, whoever I am, whoever, anybody from anywhere, to be welcome and to be healed. It makes me capable of compassion, of being able to offer my presence, not just being the one on duty. But the second point, to be very practical, is, this is an interesting story, but I'm busy. I think that each of us would be reacting very immediately in no time if I talk to you about, what do you think about this thing? Yeah, no, it's great, but I'm busy. I've meetings, I have exams, I have to study, I have courses, I have notes to write, I have research. Oh, my paper, that paper I've been writing for a long time. We live, all of us, in a very multitasking dimension and frame, and that prevents us from doing many things that probably we'd like to do. But what happens actually that very often we follow the flow. And we follow the flow of things during the day, and at the end of the day, so I did 100 things, but I don't really know what I did. I don't remember. So the issue is how to connect the dots of what we do, or what I do, with a possible significance that gives value to all of them, and not just the sum of many things, but one thing that has value, no matter in what meeting you are, in what research you are, or in what hospital ward or laboratory you are. So I want to actually quote a very interesting book that a person actually here in Chicago is a professor at Kellogg's, and his name is Harry Kramer. And Harry wrote a couple of books, but one is called From Values to Action. And in a chapter of his book, he's a former CEO of Baxter. He's a very successful business person. He is very engaged with teaching the MBA courses at Kellogg's, but he's also very engaged also in business. But he's actually a huge promoter of the culture of value-based leadership. So in his chapter of this book, there's a chapter that actually where he invites people to move from success to significance. It's not only just because you do 100 things, is you have to decide before you do 100 things, what is the significance of what you do. And so, to me, going back to the field hospital, what is the significance? What is the value that drives my life? And I think that I could talk about this for a long time, but I think there's in a nutshell, the sacred dignity of each human being is the value that comes from my being Catholic, my faith. And this value does not need only to be recognized in every person that I meet, in every student, in every patient, in everybody, but it also needs to be promoted. And at times, I have to also fight for it. So that's the value that really drives the identity that I have, that allows me to talk here tonight about who I am as a physician, as a professor, as multiple things that I do. So here at UIC, we have a special mission. And when we talk about the diversities or minorities or, talking about access to care, access to higher education, disparities, to me, these are really meaningful words, not because of political statements, though right now it'd be necessary too, but or not because of an intellectual or a philosophical idea that pleases my mind. It's real. It's that value. It's that sacred dignity of every single human being that makes sense. That to me makes sense to give value to any person, to any. So disparities, minorities, are a gift because it allows us to work for that value. So, again, going back to my daily life, this is also interesting to talk about these things, but I realize that it's not easy on a daily basis to do things or find that significance all the time or having this thing. So I found actually very, very useful reading different things and thinking about these topics that we need to commit in some way, or I need to commit, let me talk about myself, I need to commit to this value, to this significance that I want to have in my daily life by spending some time about it. It's not just because it's not for granted. It's not because I was born Catholic and I'm Italian, so 99% of the people there. That's not enough. You need, whatever value is in your life, it needs some time to be rediscovered all the time. And it takes also time to think about it, maybe before you do things, to have some time off. So I think for me, the most beautiful example of the field hospital concept has been Mother Teresa. And I think that everybody, regardless of religion, of belief, would agree that Mother Teresa has been, she's a saint, but also she was a great example of healing wounds. So I was always struck by the fact that Mother Teresa and her collaborators, nuns and volunteers, could not start any day, and she was a very pragmatic woman, not a philosopher. They would never start any day, any activity, without 1 hour of prayer and adoration. Not because they were like crazy about it, but because it was the only reason for doing what they were doing in the next probably 20 hours. So that value-based mission, that value-based significance that in my life as a physician, as a father, as a friend, as a son, I realized that it needs some time to think about it, to pray for it, and to reaffirm. Now, all these things I'm telling you, in my experience, have never been a single person effort. In other words, I don't think that is possible to accomplish, again, in a practical way, any activity or develop any concrete action as a single person. It's a team effort all the time. A value-based leadership, a value-based practice, a value-based family, a value-based friendship is always when someone is empowered by the value that is shared with other people to accomplish it. So I'm happen to be responsible for many people in my division in hematology oncology. And I always tell the people, especially the young people, that their success is my success. So I want them to be incentivized to the best they can do. But I also always point out that we have a common value, that we work for something we all recognize to be meaningful as physicians, as researchers. So as a Catholic, the church is an example. So I don't think the church would ever exist based on a single person effort. And that field hospital is not one person. Is each person 1 second in that story or 100 years in that story, as long as that value is shared. Now, there are challenges. It's not always that smooth and sweet and nice. As a physician, as a Catholic physician, there are challenges to decision to be made, to thoughts that can be not always easy to address. Science and medicine sometimes require some discernment where the truth is or what is the value. And I am here, so I'm not uncomfortable saying actually there are situations where I do not agree with other physicians, or even ethical issues that can be debatable. It's not always white or black or white. And there are issues like end-of-life issues, abortion, stem cells, that require a lot of discussion, and is always like, my way to address these things as a Catholic person is always to look at my identity, to go back to Caravaggio and see who I am. So a few years ago, I had actually a story that I put together because I was, in the news actually, there were like stem cells, embryonic stem cells can cure, in a mouse model, it was published in a beautiful paper, that embryonic stem cells can cure Parkinson. But other mouse models that can cure a lot of things. So the question was, how do I relate to that? So as a physician, to have embryonic stem cells to cure a disease is great. You know, the goal of our life is, as a physician, is to cure people. And to have a cure, you can't have anything better than that. As a researcher, I have a lab too. And as a researcher, it's fascinating, you know, to find a way to cure something, to discover new mechanism and new strategies. It's what you do as a researcher. As a father, thinking of my son or my daughter having a very bad disease and finding a cure, which could be embryonic stem cell or something, I couldn't ask for anything better. You know, if you talk to any parent would give his life or her life for one of their children. So there's nothing more important than their children. So, however, I was not happy with all this story completely, because as a human being, as a man, I realized actually that something was missing there. So by looking at this topic, I was thinking about it, and I looked at my own life, and you know, I have 3 children, so beautiful children. Every parent says that his children are the best, right? The most beautiful, the smartest, and you know, my son does that. You know, he walked before everybody else. So that's every day. So I have 3 different beautiful children, and I'm grateful for them. I would give my life for them. But my wife and I had I'd say right now, the gift to have another child who survived 40 days, and then she died. And she died because she had multiple genetic abnormalities and incompatible with life. So we learned a lot from that little girl. We learned that life that lasted only for 40 days in a PICU was as valuable as the life of our other children. She taught us more than most of the things that we have had in our life. We learned the value of life, that it doesn't belong to us. So that life was not considered valuable to probably any society-based value or category, but for us it was very valuable. So that human life for 40 days, for 1 day, for 1 week, would still be as sacred and as valuable for us. So I thought, well, if that is true for my little girl, that would be true also for any embryo that I would consider as a life. And this is because of, again, I go back to my identity, that sacred value of each human being. So this gives me, as a human being, and I'm not here to say what is right or what is wrong, but as a human being, as a Catholic physician, it makes me, you know, consider what values to me, what is more important. And so that's why in those controversial areas or discussions, I have to stick with my identity. I don't want to judge anybody, but I need to be who I am. And there's a dignity of life and a dignity of death. And that's why also I'm an oncologist, so it's not uncommon to have patients who die. And there's a value in the process of life and death. And I want to just tell you a brief story of a patient who I learned from. And that's really a nice, interesting, I think, example of a field hospital where I learned from the patient. Patient it happened a few years ago. A patient is like a mid-50-years-old patient with a terminal cancer. And he was in the ICU. And the doctor from the ICU came to me and said, look, he's in the ICU. He does not want to be DNI, DNR. But he's going to die, and there's no point of resuscitating the patient. There's not a point of jumping in his chest or intubate him, because we're going to prolong his life for only probably a few hours. So can you please talk to him, because he doesn't want to sign DNI, DNR. So it's been my patient. I went to his room with all the young, you're the attending, and you have all the residents and fellows, and I said, okay, now let's see what happens. He was in the room, barely breathing, with his wife and the 2 children. Children were in the mid-20s. And the child and the children were looking on the floor, looking to the floor. And I explained to him, like, look, we've tried everything we could. We even did a bone marrow transplant. We did multiple chemotherapy. And unfortunately, nothing worked. Your cancer has learned how to spit out the chemotherapy. So unfortunately, we are out of options. And so I tried to take a long tour to get to the point, okay, now we know maybe we'll try to make you more comfortable, but we don't know what's going to happen. It may happen tonight that you may actually need to be intubated because your lungs have cancer, you had a lymphoma. And so I'm wondering if you really would like to be intubated, which could be, so I tried to make like a long story. Could have been, knowing the answer, it could have taken like 2 seconds. So he told me, he was very patient and let me speak and said, well, doctor, I know that I'm dying. I'm perfectly aware. But my family, my wife and my children have been so wonderful to me. They've been here all the time. If I need to die tonight, I want to be intubated only for them to have the time to come and see me before I die. So I said, I think you're right. He died the next day, by the way. But so it's not always that straightforward. Of course, we can see things from different angles, but when we deal with the patients and when we care about the humanity of the patient, there are things that change, because it didn't make any sense not to be DNI, DNR. But then you talk to the patient and he tells you, like, no, this is actually more important. So the field hospital, and this is my last point, the field hospital is a dimension, in my view, of our life without limits of human space or geographical space. Francis, very few, I think in the first week of his tenure as Pope, he told the people that he was asking the church to go to the periphery. He actually said that he was coming from the periphery. And he said, well, the church has to go to the periphery. And as healthcare providers, especially at UIC, we often see the periphery, the humanity periphery here in our patients. Our patient population, probably you as students, have, if you had the time or the chance to see our patients, very often we see what I like to call the periphery of humanity. But there's also other periphery. So another short story. When I was a med student 100 years ago, one summer I wanted to go to Africa to a mission. So, it's really, to me, it would be very nice and very important to find a mission to go and spend a month in there. So I was in Italy, and I found a doctor who had started a mission in Uganda, and he lived there for many years, and then he finally came back home in the north of Italy, close to Milan, and from there, he's retired as a physician. He was coordinating people from Italy going to that mission in close to Kampala. So on a Sunday, I had a friend who knew him, and so I drove there, and I went to meet him to see if he could help me going there. So this guy unfortunately, the time I had available was not long enough for him. So he said, well, this 1 month is not going to do anything to you, and they're going to, by the time you learn something what to do, it's time to. So, but he told me one thing that still remains stuck in my mind and probably in my heart. He told me, look, you are ready to go to a mission in Africa or in wherever you want, only when not to go is the same thing. So what? And he meant that, you don't go to a mission to become something else. And you don't go to a mission because you're looking for something that is not here. So you can go or not to go, but it doesn't really matter to you because it's like you're ready for a mission wherever you are and whenever it is. However, after many years, I kind of figured out how to do. So the last quotation of the Pope interview was actually, he said that it's reasonable to start, and this actually I think is a very valuable statement, it's always reasonable to start from experience. So he said, when it comes to social issues, it is one thing to have a meeting to study the problem of drugs in a slum neighborhood, and quite another thing to go there, live there, and understand the problem from the inside and study it. And then he quotes his own experience as a patient where the doctor prescribed antibiotics, but the doctor was more a research guy, so the nurse on the floor actually gave him the right dose of it. So it was 3 times more than what the doctor prescribed of the antibiotics, and he thinks that she saved his life. He said, well, laboratories are useful, but reflection for us must always start from the experience. So the experience is the starting point. So because of this, I wanted to, I could not go as a med student, but I figured out over the years, through friends and through opportunities, through circumstances, to go out. And I've been in multiple places. As a non-medical, I was actually telling before to our friends here, been twice to El Salvador in the area with the worst gang, I think, in the world, and there's like, and I lived in the community for a while just to understand. And these people, these are people actually in the community where the Catholic people in there are living their faith happily despite the gangs. But as a medical projects, I have had the fortune and the pleasure to work at UIC with the Center for Global Health, and to develop a program that actually right now is growing. It's incredible to develop bone marrow transplant, which is the one thing I know. I wish I could do more. That's the only thing I know. But to do bone marrow transplant, which is actually done to treat patients with leukemia or with cancer, with lymphomas, or sickle cell disease, in areas where it's not available because of either lack of knowledge or lack of resources, or lack of access to care for the patients, and where the people can actually have it not for profit. Because actually there's now a tourism for healthcare, as you know, where people go to get very cheap services, healthcare services, with very poor quality. So I have been to India, as actually Vice Chancellor Berish was saying before we developed a bone marrow transplant program in Bangalore in a nonprofit university. And in 2 weeks, actually, I will be back. I've been going there for 4 years to Nepal, to Kathmandu. Kathmandu in Nepal is one of the poorest countries in the world. And we are going to have the end of April, the launch finally of the only bone marrow transplant program. Nepal has 30 million inhabitants, and there's only one hematologist. I come from Italy. There are probably more hematologists in Italy than in the United States, and there are like 60 million people. And to be able, in a government hospital, so to be able to offer a bone marrow transplant to patients who have no money, so they most of the times they have to sell their house to get chemotherapy, to pay for the chemotherapy. So to be able to do that, it's a huge, I feel grateful. I think I get more than what they get there. And in a few weeks, we were going to have here a doctor from Nigeria, where I went 3 months ago, because Nigeria has the highest number of patients with sickle cell disease in the world. Nigeria is a small country, relatively small country, probably as big as Alaska, I think, size-wise, and has 180 million people. And sickle cell is, so there are 100,000 patients in the United States. There are 5 million patients in Nigeria. So now we here at UIC, we have developed this way to do bone marrow transplant in sickle cell patients without any chemotherapy. And if they have a matched donor, we like 80 to 90% of the patients are cured. So we went to Ibadan in the south of Nigeria to talk to the physician there, and we signed an agreement to help them to learn how to do that and to work with them to offer this thing to Nigerian patients. So this is not something that I do because, you know, it's a good thing to do for sure, but it always goes back to the value of each human being that comes before anything else that we can accomplish. So I think that the success can be turned into significance in my life, I hope. But it really, to make that happen, I think I need each of you and each of the person that I've been working with, because I can't do it by myself. And I thank you very much for being here.
We're giving out a lot of these tonight, so we wanted, you know, when I get a theme, I really play it into the ground, right? So same idea, same plaque, and it's to Damiano Rondelli and MD, Integritas Bioethics Symposium, Pope Francis Field Hospital Inspiration for Healthcare 2016. So
thank you very much.
You're welcome.